This is a special place where there's nothing new under the sun. Of course, the host of this show is Cora Masters Berry, the phenomenal leader, change agent, mother to the city of DC. That's Washington, D.C., for those who are watching. And she is the leader of the movement of intergenerational conversations here at Nothing New Under the Sun. We're celebrating with this special edition of Nothing New Under the Sun for the 25th anniversary of the Million Man's March. You and our community have benefited from the very commitment of Black women who have made it possible for this movement that we thought, many of us, and thought wrongly, was led only by men, but instead there is a community and a collective of women who had the vision and foresight to empower our community, our men, our children, to understand that there is a role that women play that is often omitted from our history, but it will not be omitted at this moment. We're also joined by Dr. Nisa Muhammad. She too was part of the movement, part of the collective that had a vision for an entire community. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Glad to be here.
You know, for all of us, just if you would, Miss Masters Berry, just give us an insight on that very moment. What was the energy like when you were brought the idea and sharing in the idea that there was a magical moment getting ready to happen in DC, and even the controversy of the thought of a phenomenal leader coming to town to illustrate our greatness that we hadn't seen amongst ourselves, and now the sisters had to come take charge?
Well, first of all, like anything else in life, in real time, it wasn't a Damascus moment. It was gradual. I mean, the thought was exciting, but the process and the journey was in stages. But the hope and the desire that a million Black men would come to the nation's capital to atone, to be able to come together for our community, that was a great hope, and not really thinking it might really could happen, because that's a big tall order. It had never happened before in this city, although they would like to talk that they've had all the great marches. Nobody brought 1 million people here, so we didn't know, but we started down that journey hopeful.
Dr. Muhammad, the two of you coming together and still being together in sisterhood is an illustration of what woven kinship, spiritual kinship can mean. What was it like for you to start down this road, both yourself and Ms. Masters Berry?
So first of all, I want to thank Mrs. Berry for inviting me to be on this show. And it really has become a sisterhood of service, the women that were involved. And we were really under the direction of Mrs. Berry, who at that time was the First Lady. And so she had privilege and power to organize a group of women who were moved by her dedication to this idea of a Million Man March. Mrs. Berry had a very good relationship with Minister Farrakhan, and so she was able to, at a drop of a hat, call him, ask him questions, what about this, what about that other women did not have the privilege to be able to do. And so we trusted her. We believed in her because that's just that kind of woman. That was her persona. But as I have grown to know her, she's just that kind of sister that if she says it's like that, you can take it to the bank. And over the 25 years I've grown to know her, and looked at all the projects that she has done since that time. And she's just the kind of woman that you want to have it. If you're going to have a Million Man March, you want Mrs. Berry to be on your side. You want her to be on your team.
Well, that was nice.
Well, you know what? There's a saying, Amilcar Cabral says, claim no easy victories, tell no lies. And so there were no easy victories we could claim, and I can tell no lies about it because it was all hard work, but it was honest hard work. I mean, it was totally, totally honest hard work. And one of the unique things about that march was that it brought a diverse group of people together, number one. but it also brought a diverse group of women together that were working to help put it together as well.
Yeah, she's right. It did. It was like, well, Sister Claudette Muhammad was the National Protocol Director for the Nation of Islam. And I always described her as her being the bridge between the Nation of Islam and the larger community. And so a lot of us who were not in the nation, but supportive of the mission of our people, along with the minister and anyone else who fought for us, she brought us together. I mean, I believe if it was not for Sister Claudette Muhammad, a lot of the people in the civilian life, so to speak, would never have been a part of a lot of the things that happened in the nation, but especially the Million Man March. She was the explainer and she was the bridge, and I always give her credit for that. Yes. And it took all these different elements. It's like politics. It had to be an inside and an outside strategy. The people on the outside had to be able to work with the people on the inside so we could come together for our people. And so just generally, that's how that was. On the other side of it was, and I don't want to go too far into this discussion without understanding this, that had it not been for Marion Barry, there would not have been a Million Man March in Washington, D.C. Or if it had been one, it wouldn't have been the kind that it was. I was mentioning it to my publicist, who at that time was his communication director, and she remembers the technical part of it that I wasn't involved in. She's like, you know, Marion's the one who made sure that the city services were available. They didn't have to pay for this. They didn't have to pay for that. They closed the streets. They emptied the trash. They did everything that the city could do. He did it. And he took the heat for it also. So I was, you know, we were side by side and supporting it. He did it his way and I did it my way, but it was all a hunt. When the minister came to speak to my husband about the Million Man March, he left there knowing that we were 100% behind the whole thing.
And she's absolutely right. And that is the power of what Black mayors can do when they work on behalf of the Black community. He saw the vision that the minister had for the Million Man March. And when it was explained to him and he bought into the vision, he used every inkling of power and privilege that he had to make sure that it was going to be a success. If it was coming to his city, it was going to be a success. And it was a magnanimous success. And we owe a great deal of gratitude to Marion Barry, and it was just amazing.
When you imagine the vision being shared, can you share with individuals, because people weren't in the time, and so they have no idea how an idea of something that is a vision, because when you think of the minister, this is the vision for Black men that they didn't have for themselves. Then he's selling it to another Black leader who has to have a consideration for the same audience that many don't have today. They are able to, oh, well, that may not benefit everybody. This was a Black men's march. So that took a position in the society that truly is needed now. But what was that vision like? What did you hear? What did you feel that you knew this was a moment in time that is still hasn't been replicated?
Well, first of all, what in real time, because you're right, a lot of people now who are watching this were not there or didn't understand. Before the Million Man March took place on October 16th, the minister had gone around to, I don't know how many different cities, and he would put out a call for 10,000 Black men. He would be in Philadelphia and New York and Columbus, Ohio, or Lansing, Michigan. He went all over the country. So it was the buildup. It wasn't like he just called the march and then we all showed up, but he went around and he promoted the march and he encouraged and motivated and ginned up actually the population. So by the time we got to Washington, D.C., everybody was ready to go. So it was a vision that it took about a year from the time he wanted to do it to the time it actually happened. He went everywhere. But I'm going to tell you, that Million Man March, that was a hard job. That was long and hard, and there were no mornings and there were no nights. They all ran together.
It was because the thing was,
because it's hard to put on a march. It was hard because most of the people who were involved were not professionals in doing it. We used all our best, skills that we used in other things and brought it to bear there. And there was controversy. There was, as it was inside, outside, there was a pull and a tug, so it's something that a whole book could be written on.
She's right. And the thing is, we were countering the master narrative that was in the public view about Black men. Who were Black men? This was during the time of the crack era. Black men were seen as criminals. They were seen as murderers. They were thugs. They were no good dads, deadbeat dads. So to say we're going to bring these men to Washington to lift them up, we were countering a master narrative that people were like, they're not going to come. We're not going to support this. This is too controversial. And so really to be able to do this, it really just shows, God had to be in this, because as Mrs. Berry said, we could never have thought of this and just did it ourselves and it'd be successful, because it was so much work. And then on the day of, there was still more work.
Well, yeah, and I don't want to get too deep into the controversy because there was plenty of it. But the controversy ranged from the total and the typical controversy around Minister Farrakhan. That goes with the territory. And then in addition to that, within our own community, because we had most of the ministers, Black preachers, he's a Muslim, what's this got to do with us? And I mean very prominent Black ministers. And then there was pressure put on some of our leaders like Dr. Height. She got calls from people in both our community as well as in the Jewish community saying, you're the only civil rights person left that doesn't have any scandal. If you go there, it's going to ruin your life, going to ruin your reputation. Marion had people who resigned from his cabinet. All of that was going on. So, you never hear about the controversy. You always look at the end result, which is a wonderful thing, but you had to fight a lot of battles. We had to fight inside with our people and outside with the press. And my good friend, Constance Berry Newman, at that time was the deputy or the number 2 person at the Smithsonian. She had to fight her own battles to keep all of the Smithsonian buildings open. So when people came, they would have the access to go to the bathroom, get some water. So that was also, there was controversy even or lack of understanding or concern within the government. So it was a lot of fires to put out, lots of fires.
It was an uphill battle.
In my opinion, the march was anticlimactic leading up to the march.
Right. But by the time it came, we were so happy that the day was there. Looking at all that we had gone through to lead up to it. But, God blessed us with a wonderful day. It was really wonderful. And all of our hard work and sacrifice paid off, because we could not have worked any harder than we did. We'll talk about blood, sweat, and tears. It was literally blood, sweat, and tears. It was just hard work.
Like she said, but I think one of the biggest controversies was the women.
Mm-hmm.
They were not having it. I wasn't one of them. I thought the men deserved their day. I didn't see anything wrong with calling for, 1 million Black men. I thought it was the right thing to do and the right time to do it. But most of my sisters did not agree with that, especially in the press. So the sisters, like my dear friend Julianne Melbo, she was tearing them up every week. She had weekly articles. There were about 10, 15 women in the press that wouldn't let up. They were unrelenting. So that was also, why can't the women come? Why is it men only? I to this day, I still don't agree with that concept of not letting the men come. But we had to deal with the reality. And the minister had to pay attention to that, because that was the one thing that was holding back our community in unity, other than the Christian thing that the preachers, did, which, they do all the time. But it was that division between the men and the women that was being created by the call for this march with excluding women.
And women came, women showed up, and nobody said, go home, you're not supposed to be here. What are you doing here? Women came, women showed up, and, they were well received. And the thing is that women were an integral part of the planning and production of the march from the very beginning.
But the inside was that, were there going to be any women on the program? Now, anything that goes on, women going to work, they're going to be the worker bees all down through the history of our people, civil rights movement, Black Power movement. Women did the work, men got the glory. That goes with the territory in this country. But this time, while we were working, it became clear that we needed a more prominent role in order to make the women who were out there upset understand that we were working from inside, outside, from bottom to top. And so the minister, being the visionary person, and he has, as they used to say it in the Bible, my mother used to call it discernment. He had the discernment of what was necessary to bring his people together. And he was always number one of his concern. So he started opening up and being interested and listening to the conversation. So we gathered at NCNW, Dr. Height, myself, Sister Nisha, Barbara Skinner, Yvonne Scruggs, I can't remember, about 8 women, maybe a little less, maybe 6, to discuss if we're going to support the Million Man March. And we had asked the minister about his vision statement, wanted to know what it was about. You know, back then, nobody was emailing. He faxed it to us and said, you know, sisters, look at it and do what you think you need to do. And, you know, we sat there and, I mean, it was a great statement, but, you know, we had a few corrections here and there. And Barbara changed the whole title from Day of Atonement to Reconciliation and one other thing. I think.
Day of Atonement and Reconciliation.
And Reconciliation. She added Reconciliation. So
Yeah.
we sent it back and we was like, okay, this is when he's going to tell us to go fly a kite.
Go bake a cake.
You know,
Yeah.
and I think other than one small thing, he accepted the whole thing. And that was like, oh, okay, well, let's do this.
Let's do
We
this.
started going to work. Now, we weren't yet on the stage, but we were playing a more prominent role. And obviously, we did make it to the stage, but that was also increments. That was one person at a time. Rosa Parks, Betty Shabazz, Maya Angelou, all of the people who showed up, they didn't all come as a group. I mean, they didn't agree as a group. Each one of them had to be approached and discussed and asked individually, and had to ask them to buy into the whole march. But I believe, actually, if you, this is my opinion, maybe it's biased. If you think about the Million Man March, other than the minister, the names of the people that have the most prominent, memorable presentations were the women.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't remember anybody else. I know Marion spoke and the minister spoke, and who else? Betty, I mean, Rosa Parks, Maya Angelou, you know,
Right.
Dorothy Height.
You spoke.
I spoke. I was the first to speak I was the first woman to speak at the Million Man March. Yes, I did. But I don't remember the men other than Marion and the minister. I don't remember, and there were many of them.
Right. There were a lot. There are a lot of people. Some people just showed up and said, you know, I'm here. I want to speak.
Yep, I see it. Yeah. Well, that's a picture, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. We'll go back to that in about 10 minutes because I have a surprise guest that I want to talk to about that. But so we did, and the story that, you know, everybody laughs about because, well, it's funny, but it's true, was when the minister, one of his many, many visits to Marion's office, they'd come off and they'd sit and talk. I don't even know if they talked about the Million Man March. They just liked each other. So they just sit up there and talk because he wasn't really doing all the logistics and neither was Marion. And we were standing by a picture of Marion swearing in and taking a picture. I have the picture. I should have sent it. I have a picture of me and the minister standing in front of it. And it was a big picture. And the minister looked up and said, and in that picture of Marion swearing in at his last inauguration, is a picture of Maya Angelou standing, because she spoke at his inauguration. And he looked up and he said, Sister Cora, I want that woman, Dr. Maya Angelou, to write a poem for the Million Man March. And Sister Cora, she can get any man she wants to read it. So that's where we were yet. We was at a point, right, where somebody's gonna write a poem and give it to a man to read. I was like, uh-oh, but I didn't say that to him. I said, okay. And I was like, I don't think that's gonna happen. So.
But that just shows her skill and her strategy, that she knew how to handle the situation, as opposed to saying, like you said, that's not gonna happen, that's a bad idea. You know, she just said, okay, and she knew how to bring it up at a later point to get the better idea of Dr. Maya Angelou reciting her own poem at the Million Man March.
Yeah.
When you think about that, what can we learn? What can generations, young generations understand about how you know when to push and when to kind of like wait to that moment where you can bring up the idea versus feeling disrespected with the idea. I mean, how can we bridge that even intergenerationally so that we could pause enough to respect each other and then come back together and approach that idea?
Well, I'm really not the best person for that because I'm a Taurus and I've often been described as a bull in a china closet. I'm very direct, but in my old age and even younger, sometimes you have to understand what people's intentions are as opposed to what they say. And I knew that Minister Farrakhan, as an example, had the best intentions in his heart. He wasn't trying to disrespect. That was just where he was at the moment. And I knew that having a conversation in that moment was not going to be wise. So to answer your question, you have to be able to understand all of the elements that are going on in the moment and know when to hold it and know when, to approach it again. And I knew right then and there that there was no reason to have another conversation about that. But as we went down the road, I was on that journey between that time and when the minister actually, by the time he got to that point, I never asked Maya to be a part of the Million Man March. That was not my job to do. But what I did do is facilitate the meeting between him and Maya so he could ask her himself. And once that happened, he asked her to speak and he asked her to write a poem and she graciously accepted. But by that time, Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner was pretty much putting the program together along with Linda Boyd, myself, Sister Nisha. We were doing the work, lining up the speakers. We were doing the grunt work. We weren't just trying to speak at a march. We were making the march happen. I mean, I'm not saying the brothers wasn't there, but they weren't there when we were there. They were in their room, we were in our room, and we were working on these scripts. You know how complicated all this is. And so things evolve. For instance, Barbara Skinner is so effective and efficient in how she does things that ultimately she ended up being the stage manager. Do people know that the stage manager for the Million Man March was a woman? Do they? They don't even know that.
Right, probably they don't.
Because by the time they got there, nobody could do it but her, because pretty much it was our stuff. Our Reverend Willie Wilson was with us in that journey. So yeah. And Betty Shabazz, that was a journey. How she got involved, and her history with the Nation of Islam, but she was able to get past that for the greater good of our people. So each one of those women had a story that got them where they were going.
You say it matter-of-factly, but for many people who are listening now, Dr. Muhammad, they may have no idea who Betty Shabazz is and was to our community. Why would she have such a love and want this moment for Black men, Dr. Muhammad? What did she see and hear and share for the vision of our community to be a part of this history?
She's a beloved wife of Malcolm X. And so with that, I mean, she had a love for our community. And so we were honored to have her as a speaker at the march. I mean, it was just a joy and an honor to have her there and to speak. And the men warmly received her. I mean, she was just a great asset to have. But I want to go back to your point about what can generations today learn. Our young people today are part of the keep it real generation and keep it 100. And sometimes you just can't keep it. It's not good to just keep it real. It's not good to just keep it 100. Some things you may have to tone it down a bit. Some things have to be saved and presented at a later date. And that takes skill and that takes strategy. And a lot of times that takes maturity and wisdom to learn that, because just because it comes up in your mind doesn't mean it has to come out. And a lot of times young people don't know that and don't understand that because they're not often in environments where they can learn these kind of things. The young people that worked on the Million Man March who have gone on to do great things. But our young people today don't often have the experiences to learn the kind of things that we learned on the job training ourselves. We had never put on a Million Man March before, so we learned as well. And so our young people today don't have as many experiences to learn that sometimes you just have to wait. You just can't say it. Patience really is a virtue.
But that's the wisdom of us elders. I by nature, I'm a very impatient person. I mean, like OCD impatient, and that's taken years for me. I mean, my brain runs fast. If you can't hold my attention long, so I can say that now, but I wasn't always like that. And most young people aren't, and you have to meet them where they are in the space that they are in. And that's the last thing they want to hear. And it was the last thing I wanted to hear when I was their age, is be patient. They don't want to hear that.
Right.
Well, I really was going back to what both of you were saying, is just in the process. I mean, it literally, birthing an idea, sharing a vision will create personal and spiritual editing. And I think you're in a moment where, how do we all come together spiritually and collectively edit ourselves for the greater good? And I think that even as we see this moment, how do we understand that we must celebrate this moment? We must give recognition to both the mayor, Marion Barry, both the wonderful Minister Farrakhan, but at the same time, for all those women who put the actual teeth, put the roadmap, put the whole ideology together. I think it's for us to continue to recognize, even in this moment right now, that women and Black women are continuing to be the shepherds of the truth and the spirit of who we are as a community.
But let me just respond to that, because one of the unique things, I just did a quick photo shoot with the New York Times, and they're doing a small story tomorrow about the fact that I headed up the voter registration drive. That is my best kept secret in the country, but I never think much about it. But that's important, because that's another example of women coming together. The minister approached me because he asked me would I head up his voter registration drive for the Million Man March. And because my husband had just made a historic comeback, he'd come out of prison, going back to office, and then went back all the way to the mayorship. And I had registered 20,000 new voters and got 19 of them to the polls. And he thought, well, if you can do it for Brother Barry, you can do it for the Million Man March. And so I initially said no, because he had gone around the country registering all these Black men as independents. And so I said to the minister, I said, I can't do that. I said, that will hurt our people. He said, sure enough, Sister Cora, why do you say that? He said, I don't know a lot about this voter stuff now. You have to explain it to me. Because he was always open to hear new things, because he lived most of his life in a bubble. So he's out there talking to all of us sinners. So I explained to him, and it's a long story, but the short of the story is that we have to vote in primaries if we're going to have any impact on who's going to be elected. It's just the politics of this country. It sounds good to say I'm an independent, but it really does give you 50% of the power you could have. And then when I said that in so many words, Brother Alim Muhammad, who was at the table, let me just explain. In context, the minister would come and he would stay at the hotel once or twice a month. And when he would hold his meetings there, we'd all go up to the room and to the suite, and there'd be these long tables and all of these conversations would take place. So this particular one took place at his hotel suite, 10, 15, 20 people around the table eating. And he asked me from the head of the table, and I was on the other end, to do it. And when I said no, you could hear, nobody says no to Minister Farrakhan. And I didn't say no. I said, with all due respect, Minister Farrakhan, I can't do that. And everybody's like, oh. And I told him why. And so, make a long story short, when I said that and explained it quickly, Minister Alim Muhammad said, she's right, Minister, because when the Brother Barry was running and we ran up there to vote for him in the primary, they said we couldn't vote because we were independents. And so she's right. We wouldn't, Brother Barry never would have made it if they was lying on our vote. So I eventually agreed to be the head of, the chair of, coordinator of the voter registration for the Million Man March. And I did that in a coalition and cooperation with my dear friend, who I'm hoping will be coming up on here soon, with the National Coalition of Black Civic Participation, Melanie Campbell. Because what we had to do, and a lot of people don't realize it, is that you didn't just register the minister, you didn't just register people on that day. We registered them in, I'd say, 30 of the 50 states. There were local organizing committees all over the country. That's what they called LOCs.
Yeah, over
And
300.
yes,
Over
and
300.
we sent out FedExed voter registration forms all over the country. We registered at least a couple of 100,000 people before the march ever took place. And I met a lifetime friend, but that's where I first met Melanie Campbell. She had just come to Washington. She still had the red clay on her shoes from Georgia. So I wonder if she's supposed to come on. I wonder if she's having a problem getting on. I haven't, oh yeah, I think
You have to reach out for Ashley.
Yeah, I'm about to do that right. Yeah, please.
So the voter registration drive was just another aspect of the women taking charge and being able
She needs, excuse me, she said they need to let her in. She's trying to get in. Somebody needs to let her in. I'm sorry, go on, Ashley.
No, the voter registration drive is another opportunity of showing where the women took charge and the women were responsible for a certain task and they made it happen. And so women all around the country were registering people to vote.
Women.
Now, I don't anticipate that is something that's new. I think women are often in charge invisibly, without saying it, without making us feel less than and uncomfortable as they shape our ideas. And I think the more we're able to listen to our women, we can actually achieve even more goals because they have senses that we don't have. And I think putting it together and being able to be recognized is something that's really important, Ms. Masters-Berry, as you talk about intergenerational young women being able to glean and understand what you and Dr. Muhammad are sharing, so that we don't alienate each other and don't understand that we have an interdependence. How would you suggest to some of the younger women and those in the movement today coalesce their ideas with the men of this moment as well?
Well, you know, I'm in an organization, or I'm a part of a group of women called Win with Women, Win with Black Women. And it's over 200 women, spontaneous. There's no mission statement. There's none of that. We meet on the phone every Sunday evening at about 8:30 till about 11. And it's from, as I've said before, the ages range from 21 to 84. And when I came into the circle, the issue was, we need a Black woman as a vice presidential candidate. And they were like very adamant about it on so many different levels, and writing letters, making calls. So the men, to answer your question, came to us and said, we'd like to join you. And we said, no, do your own movement. Create your own advocacy, have your own voice. And they did. I mean, Reverend Barbara and a bunch of them, they got together. I think it was over 100 Black men who wrote a letter saying, we want a Black woman, blah, blah, blah. So I don't know about bringing them in. I think sometime at this stage of the game, we're busy trying to catch up, you know, in that whole empowerment thing. We're still not, you know, represented in a way in which I think it makes us on par on so many different ways with men. So I don't really see that interaction, but I do see parallel movements, and I do see because let me tell you something. Inevitably, when you start interacting and intertwining your movement with men's movement, some kind of way, we kind of move off the front of the thing, and they kind of at the top, and we some kind of way have lost our perch. So I think we just kind of want to stay on our perch in leadership where we are, and we're gonna look over there and see where they are, and then we'll work together on projects, and eventually we don't know what might be bought, where it may come to. I mean, that's just what I've observed with this generation of women, young women. They're not really interested in being on the back seat. Here comes my friend.
Hey, Melanie.
Hello. Hey, classmate.
What's going on?
How you doing?
I've been praying for you.
Hey, prayer changes things. Indeed, indeed. Thank you for the prayers. And hey, Sister Lisa.
How are you doing?
Been a while.
Good to see you.
You too. You all too. Very much too. And just, Cora's my guardian angel. Yeah, her, my mama said her and my mama had conversations, said I need to stay around a little longer. So I'm here.
And we're glad. I kind of bypassed and did not get into deep about the voter registration because that's where I met you. So maybe you could, kind of fill in about the Million Man March and how you got involved.
Yeah, I was listening in. 25 years ago, I moved to DC from Atlanta, and started a new job August 15th, 1995, to stay a year and a half. Now I've been here 25 years. But I met, I was deputy director at the time. James Ferguson was the head of the organization. And I think it was maybe Cora Scott, who was chief of staff of Ron Dellum's back in the day. And they came to the office to meet with my executive director, Ferguson, at the time. And we talked about the Million Man March and started voter registration, connecting voter registration to the Million Man March. And so my first assignment was to work with Mrs. Berry to help pull that together. And I remember we set up the office on 8th Street when it was majority Black. Gentrification is changing all of that. But in 95, it was straight up, more Black folks on 8th Street. And we got busy, and connected it to the local organizing committees, LOCs. And so the idea was for folks to start registration before they came to the march. And we set up on the mall. Back then, Cora, remember it was Operation Big Vote. Remember the big old orange buttons? I didn't get a chance to. I was trying to find one of the big old orange buttons that we used to have, but set up voter registration all on the mall. And I remember sitting on the steps back then you could sit on the steps of the Capitol without being harassed, right? And sat on the steps with Reverend Orange. Remember James Orange, who's passed away, who had come into town, but just being able to see that. But the main thing was that we were able to get registration done, and tied it. And that's that next sheet. Well, let me step back. National Voter Registration Act was passed, Motor Voter, passed in 93. And so we were able to use the federal form to get people, so wherever you were from, you could get registered to vote, right? So we were able to do that. But if people go back and remember, the 1996 presidential election was the first time Black men voted more than anybody. I forget the number, but Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies wrote a piece on it. Eddie Williams was still with us. So many ancestors now, right? Some of these names showing the ancestors, but it was really important that there was some agenda attached to the march, and part of that was voter registration. And Cora, Ms. Berry led it, partnered with National Coalition, and so it was my first big assignment, if you will. I remember staying up nights putting together packets to get to the LOCs, and so it's good memories in it, and I think it still has a residual effect even today.
Well, I also still had, and again, in deference to Marion, I still basically had the team together that had done this other thing. Remember now, we came in office in January of 95, so we were still together.
We didn't have to find any volunteers. We didn't have to find any volunteers.
No, they were already there. So we got free space in an office, and we set up an operation. And Rosalind Stiles did the day-to-day.
Yes, and I remember Ross. Yes.
Yeah.
I forgot.
And this is all women now. Remember now, this is the Million Man March. Let's keep the big picture going. And then the night before, I always tell this story because it always, goes back to, men being men. We were all gathered at the Willard Hotel, myself, Dr. Hyde, Maya Angelou, Brother Leonard Muhammad, his wife, Donna, all of us. Rosa Parks, big old long table at the Willard Hotel. The night before the march, everybody, we all piped up, and my security came in and told me that I had a phone call in the car. That's before we all had cells. I went out to the car, Rosin called me and told me that the brothers from from Nation of Islam had called and said, you guys have done a great job. We appreciate it. We're going to take it from here. So you all don't need to show up tomorrow at the march because we're going to have men doing that. I said, okay, I'm glad you told me. So I went right on back to the table, sat down, and then I said to Brother Leonard, who is the minister's, at that time he was the minister's chief of staff and his son-in-law.
Mm-hmm.
So I sat back and I waited till I said, Minister, I said, Brother Leonard, I just got a call, and they don't want the sisters showing up. They said they're gonna take it over. And before I could finish that sentence, Maya says, oh, no, I know that's not true. And all the women went in and see the Lord's tuck. All of them went in. I just sat back and just kind of smiled. And he looked at me, if looks could kill, I would be an ancestor right now.
But again, you knew how to handle the situation. Again, you knew how to take your time, how to say it at the right moment for the right effect, so that it would, achieve the appropriate results.
Yeah, it took about 20 minutes. He got up from the table, came back and said that was all the mistake. He don't know, he fixed it up.
Right.
And as history will record, the women were on the mall and they were the ones registering the men.
People to vote.
Exactly.
All over the mall.
Men to vote. Exactly. Gladly, happily. I mean, it just shows the cooperation that happened between, and these are untold stories, the cooperation that happened between the brothers and the sisters that day.
Yeah. It's a beautiful day.
Mm-hmm.
A beautiful day, but it's also part of the movement that we want other generations to understand that literally women have played a role and don't want it omitted from history. When you do a seat at the table and you think about Melody and that generation or her generation being able to meet a first lady who was open, who continued to have a relationship. When you think of you and you teaching over there being the assistant dean at Howard, still teaching next generation and keeping your hands on the clay, molding. I mean, it's really key when you think of nothing new under the sun, that this was new information for us to once again celebrate. Because if we don't, then we miss the truth about how important women are to every aspect of any movement that has ever happened in this country since we've been here.
And what I remember, because I was fresh out of Atlanta, coming from what they used to call me, you part of that Atlanta mafia, right? But the sisters really the ones who embraced me. It wasn't easy to be in this town. And so with Cora, and I think you called Yvonne Scruggs Leftwich, Julianne Malveaux, Dr. Height, and so many women, because you can also remember Cora when I had, we will not get into that. We're gonna stay focused on the conversation. But it was the sisters who
there are untold stories that shall remain untold.
Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation for another day. But I can say they embraced me and helped to train me and paying it forward. We paying it forward and the key of being able to understand that intergenerational connection made us more powerful. And it wasn't just recent generations. This wasn't, these were sisters who were pushing, I don't know, the whole lot just sitting at the table. Just sitting at the table.
Who was at the table, and you think about movement maker, and you think
about Lawrence Tucker was still around.
Right. But you think about Rosa Parks sitting and being a part. You think about whose lasting legacy pushed every inch of the movement to that day.
Yeah. And then Nisia didn't go. I remember Sister Claudette with her quiet storm self.
They called her a quiet storm. Yes. She was definitely a mover and shaker.
Right. Mm-hmm. And we just have to, and with our younger generations, we have to continue to pay it forward and respect those who came before us and know that we're not, and what's nothing new under the sun. Right. That's real. And then we're all here for a journey. And so I'm gonna thank Cora again for also just being the sister that she is, not just in her leadership role, but just being there. And this 45-day journey I've been on with COVID, I was want to publicly again thank you for being my sister in that storm and really pushing me to go get it. In many ways, saved me from a worse situation. So I just want to thank you for that again.
Well, all I can say is you would have done it for me. We do it for each other.
Mm-hmm.
But when we talk about, I think it might be my mother, but it's in me it's not a program for me to, I think about Melanie. It's a natural instinct for me to reach out and pull people in or involve them or support them or guide. It's just part of it's not a program I wrote down somewhere. It's just my instincts.
DNA.
Melanie, I thought was hard worker and deserved to be respected in her own right. And I eventually just said, come over here and work with me. I'm not going over there anymore. I need you to shine in your own light. I don't need you to be in anybody's shadow. That was just my instincts. And that's just how I am. It's not, I don't have any other way to be. And so when I was very the big Delta in the sense they had me on all these national committees, they had me doing this. And, my reputation at that time was voter registration. So they'd have conventions and they want me to do voter registration drives. I just kept saying, Melanie's the one who got that. Melanie's a Delta. Bring Melanie in. Bring Melanie. Melanie can do this. Melanie can do that. Next thing I knew, Melanie's in, I'm out. And she's still doing it. And I haven't been to a Delta convention since
You threw me in the briar patch, and
then I went on about my business. But I just think that's what we do as women. And so with the Nation of Islam, when we were working on that, we embraced it. I just don't remember any angst between the women. The non-Muslim women and the Muslim women, we were sisters. There was no anything. Now, I can't say that between me and the brothers because I was hard for them to take. I mean, at one point, one of the brothers whose name I won't call turned to Marianne and said, can't you control your woman? I'll never forget that. I was just the only person who understood me, never seemed offended by me, was Minister Farrakhan. I would talk to him straight up and down, and I would always say, Minister Farrakhan, with all due respect, he's when she starts like that, here we go with something. But I was a little much. I was a little much for them because I was sort of out of the mode, But other than that, the women, we worked really hard on that. Dr. Height, I want to go back to that because she was under a lot of pressure not to participate, but from Black people of a certain ilk, and especially white people. And she is like a rock, very quiet. I'm the opposite. I'm bullying and Santa Claus. Where I would have been hanging up on people, she just said, thank you, glad you called. And then she showed up. And this to me was a line that stands out in my mind of every speech that anybody made other than my poem. She stood there very tall and straight. And remember now, everybody said, you can't do that, it's gonna ruin your reputation, Minister Farrakhan, this, Minister Farrakhan, that. She stood in, she looked out of the sea of millions of Black men and said, I am here because you are here. And it was like, that's it. In other words, that was a lesson to me she was my elder. That was a generational lesson to me that she had in one sentence summed up what everybody else was trying to, shame her or pressure her. She's like, I'm going to go where my people are. But rather than say that to them, she said it to the world. So I don't know if many people remember that, but I was like, wow. And, with Dr. Height, although we were very good friends, I always held her. I mean, sometime when I would be at her house or whatever, she's talking, I really wanted to just grab a pen and just start writing down. And so what did E. Franklin Frazier say? And what did you say that Lawrence Dunbar said? And I mean, she just be dropping them names, And I'm sure a lot of people feel that way now about us because I was in a meeting when I went to get my, get a photo shoot today. And I was talking about that meeting and the young people who was in the room, they said, you're just dropping names like C. Dolores Tucker and Rosa Parks and Maya, you're just dropping names. I said, well, I'm not dropping names.
Those were real.
It was just,
real people you worked with.
yeah. And just, well, you know, each generation has their, you know, their moments where they make history, and you don't, and I always say, you don't know you're making history while you're making history, just doing what you need to do.
Right.
And this is the first time, and I don't know why, of all the celebrations of the Million Man March, except for one or two incidents, this is the first time I've seen so much attention given to the women. I've seen at least 4 articles about the women. I know the Final Call did one about the women. New York Times did one about the women. They're celebrating tomorrow. You know, what do you think that is, Munson? Why do you think all of a sudden people decided to celebrate the women? We've been in the dark all this time.
25 years.
You'd have to be blind at this moment to not understand that there's a truth that everyone is denied about how important and how it has been Black women forever in any movement. And there's a movement right now, asunder, that is here. And so when they look at something, you can't look at the same old lens. You've got to really look at the honest lens. And it's going to cause us, and I say this even as a community, we're going to have to take that lens post-election and begin to look at ourselves again. And I think that it was that moment. I think that it's this moment, that we are in your moment. And why not recognize the 3 women that are here and say thank you from all the brothers, I'm speaking for the brothers. We are here because you were there. Not I'm here and I'm here. We are here because you were there. There for us in spite of ourselves. Because that is it. You know, most time you playing chess, you need somebody to checkmate you. Not just be there and agree. You need somebody to checkmate you. And that's what it is. So we are here because you were there and you're still there on the front line. And it's your moment, but it's always been your moment. Nobody would say it's your moment.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So this picture, we never discussed the picture, the photo. Let's discuss the photo.
Oh yeah, go back to the photo.
I don't think that photo is a typical photo of that you. When I saw, you know, that I saw this photo for the first time 2 days ago, Munson.
No.
It came up in an article that the Final Call did, and I was like, what? This photo is worth 1,000 words. So let's talk about it. First of all, this photo was October 17th.
Yeah.
It was the day after the Million Man March. Now, remember I said that we had set up office on 8th Street above a store for our board registration team. The day after the march, the minister said, I want to go thank these women for registering these men and doing all that work. So the minister is like a president. The minister moves, thousands of people move with him. So he says, I'm coming over. Now, the office was about as big as probably your bathroom. I mean, we didn't have no luxury suites or nothing, but some kind of way, he showed up in that big car and all about 20 cars and, you know, nation, everybody jumping out, FOI. And some kind of way the word got out that he was coming. And as far as the eye could see, there were people all across the street, down the street, waiting for him to show up. This is the day after. Now, everybody's still ginned up from the march. He gets out the car and he stands up and waves and everybody's waving back. And, you know, they didn't like that because that's not good security. So they whisked them back in. And so the picture you see is a picture of me speaking. This was my day. And if you look at the banner in the back, it says voter registration. That was our office. That was not on the mall. That was in our office on 8th Street. And you see to the right, there's Ben Chavis, there's some of the brothers. Right behind me, the brother, Leonard Muhammad, you can't see him over the shoulder. Then there's Mustafa Muhammad, which is the minister's son. And then the minister, and then Dick Gregory, and then Stallings. And who's that on the end, Sister Nisha? I can't think of his name.
James Ferguson got that big orange button on.
Right, James Ferguson, the one who was working with Melanie.
Dick Gregory? Dick Gregory in the back?
Right there with the hat on.
Yeah.
And I was speaking to see a woman at the microphone and all of these men behind her, especially from the Nation of Islam. I think that's a rare shot. And if anybody ever doubted that I ever did that, look at that shot. I was like, wow. I was like, that's probably one of the most iconic shots that I've ever seen for me, because of what it represented, because of the story behind it, and because that was the day after the Million Man March. It was not the day before or the day of. So, and we had about, in that little space, we had about 40 members of the press were in there, because wherever Minister Farrakhan went, they were there. And I remember Feynman, who was working at Newsweek, and probably I'm looking at my facial expression and theirs. He's obviously from the name, Howard Feynman, I think. I'm trying to think of his name, but I never forget him, because every time I see him on TV since then, I always think about that moment. And he asked a question, and I'm sure it was one of those questions that, trigger everybody, because you can look at everybody's face, they're like, and he asked it to me. So I'm sure it was a Farrakhan type question. And that was that moment. We had about 40 members of the press there in that little space. All of those people in front of the camera, and then the press, and then all the people crowded out inside. It was a special moment. And a lot of people don't know that the minister did that the next day, but he sure did. Yep. So that's what that picture is. And I look back at it and I was like, oh, I was cute.
Still cute. Yeah, in your natural hair, and you look proud, and you were leading, and you were in charge, just like nothing new under the sun in the role that women played. So yes, they know that it would be the truth if they wrote anything different. It would not be the truth if the 25 years they didn't recognize the women. So we want to say thank you to all of you women for your contributions, your continued service, because not many serve so long, not many serve so many. And we want to say thank you. So I think it would be impossible to not recognize you, given this movement. You've got a super Black woman on the ticket. You've got the demands. And I love that the women came together and demanded something. I think that's kind of generally it's a meek cry and say, well, consider. I think it was a demand. Everybody was demanding that.
It was an or else.
Right.
It was actually an or else. And the Black men, I'll give them credit, because he was asking about us coalition and how they came to us, and we said, no, do your own thing. But they went a step further. You know what they said? They said, if you don't put a Black woman on the ticket, you're going to lose.
Yeah, I did.
And the rest is history. But I want to thank you all for coming. Sister Nisha, I'm so proud of you, what you're doing at Howard. Down through the years, I've seen you grow. It's been amazing.
No,
See,
I'm just trying to keep up with you. I'm just trying to keep up with you.
We can't.
I know. That's what I said. I'm just trying. I am just trying.
Yes, ma'am.
And thank you, Munson, because y'all know this show was proposed this time yesterday. I was just talking to him in general about, what was going on. All right, let's do a show tomorrow night. I said, oh, what? He said, The Million Man. I said, oh my God. So it was such short notice for you guys to come on. So I really appreciate it. And I appreciate
thank you.
And Munson, you've been rolling out. I remember when you started. And being able to keep that publication going as long as you have. And then when I found out,
we're a brand now.
And being able to make sure you tell our stories. So I want to thank you for that.
We got stories, we got TV, but it's just community. At the end of the day, we have to be a community. We have to have a collective thought.
And that's serving. That's serving. So I thank you.
And Miss Cora Masters Berry has such a wonderful vision. It's okay. For me, it's nothing more than time. And I would rather serve my time serving someone who has a big vision and has always had a vision for several generations, so that we don't miss this moment. So when she said it, I like, it's a great idea, and I couldn't see it, and I hadn't seen you. Love you. And assalamu alaikum to my sister there.
Wa alaikum salam.
All that she's given, and want to thank Miss Cora Masters-Berry for all she does. This is nothing new under the sun. You do not have to be in the streets, but you do have to be in the struggle. So we want to thank you all for tuning in to Nothing New Under the Sun. Thank you to Dr. Nisha Muhammad. Thank you to Melody Campbell. And of course, big thanks and much love to Ms. Cora Masters Berry. Good evening, everyone. We'll see you soon again on Nothing New Under the Sun here on the Seat at the Table. Thank you.